Well, welcome everybody to the Ask an Accountant podcast, where we demystify accounting by simply asking your pressing questions from the industry's best and brightest. My name's Tony Wilson, your host, quirky friend, and total accounting nerd. Today I'm joined by my South African turned Californian friend, Zane Stevens. Zane is the founder and director of Protea Financial Services, an outsourced accounting solution focused on serving businesses in the wine industry with 10,000 cases or lower in production. Zane, welcome to the show.
Hey, Tony, thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, this is pretty cool because I've been watching all the episodes like in preparation for this, and like your guests have been really, really great. They seem a lot smarter than I am, so today could be could be interesting. People might be a little shocked with the South African humor as well, I guess.
I mean, but that's the great thing about having you on the show is you are South African, so it's gonna be a unique flavor for sure. The other thing that you've got in your favor is you can talk a lot too, right? Like that's gonna go in your favor.
I do like to talk. I've always got a lot to say. I have a lot of opinions, so we'll see how this one goes.
That's right. One opinion in particular, which I think is great, is you have an opinion about job titles. Like when you moved from South Africa to here, you said something about job titles and Americans, and you want to expand on that?
Yeah, I just don't get them in the US, right? There's just a ton of these like job titles. In South Africa, it was pretty simple. You know, you're an accountant, maybe a senior accountant, you're a financial manager. Really easy to follow what you're doing. And then I come here and I get all these sort of like controller and director of finance and like all this BS that I don't really understand. I don't particularly know if anybody else actually understands what it means. Um, and my favorite is just like the term VP. Like everybody is a vice president. Like what does it mean? Like are we important or aren't we important, or is this something we're throwing around?
Probably a little bit of all of that, for sure. Yeah, it's funny because like I obviously grew up in the American market, so I just assume this is normal. But I think you're right. I do like the more simple approach to our naming convention. Well, you think about it, it's like the term or like the concept of inflation, only it's like title inflation. Like if everybody's a director, then like who's really a director, kind of thing. So
Yeah, there definitely feels like at some point people like we need to make people feel better, and we're just not going to pay them more, so we're going to make up a bunch of titles so people feel good about themselves.
yeah, what's the old saying? If you can't give a person a raise, give them a promotion. That'll do
Exactly,
it.
right? Like that's what it feels like.
Yeah, that'll do it. That'll do it. Well, I will just say, like many of my prior guests, you also share a passion for teaching and education. You have a YouTube channel that's called Protea Academy. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah, Protea Academy. When I was coming out of high school, I wanted to be a teacher. So that was sort of like my first passion. And I was basically told, don't be crazy. You're too smart. You're not going to get paid enough. Go become an accountant. You're really good at numbers. So I went into that. That was great. When I was doing my postgrad, I had an opportunity to teach at high school. I taught business and accounting to sort of 8th to 12th grade, helped a bunch of kids get through their exams who had a hard time. I was there like for my seniors, I was like their fifth or sixth teacher in 4 years. It was ridiculous.
Wow.
They've been through a lot, so I got to do that. When I was at KPMG, I became a certified trainer, so I had opportunity to train people both on technical topics as well as soft skills. So I had all these opportunities throughout my career to teach people accounting and just get to a point where I'm trying to help people better understand what's going on. And when I started Protea, I always thought, hey, what a great opportunity it would be, other than helping people with really good financials, how about if we could help a broader audience by giving them good accounting information? So, we've got a bunch of really good content on our blog post, and we thought, hey, as a first step, we're going to turn this into some words because, this day and age, people are lazy and don't particularly want to read things and have a short concentration span. So
Right.
if we turn it into video with words, we can turn it on in the background and we can hear it. I'm fortunate enough, my team member down in South Africa, her name is Michelle. She's got a passion for teaching as well. Before she joined us, she sort of made a decision between us and taking up a lecturing job at the university. We're fortunate that she took us on, and we took that passion. We said, hey, why don't you help us with this YouTube channel? So her and I collaborated on different topics, and we put a bunch of content out there. It's sort of grown a little bit. There's not just the educational stuff. We have conversations about some real topics, interviews with team members. I go live every now and then to, just share some of my thoughts, some of my opinions. They're normally 4 or 5 minutes. They are Zane rants for sure. And, we've got a lot of cool stuff coming this year. I'm really excited about some of the stuff we'll be releasing in the second half of the year.
So for everybody listening, if you want to be in the know, you want to be in the loop, go and subscribe to the Protea Academy YouTube channel ASAP. You don't want to miss out. There's lots of cool stuff coming down the road. So.
Yep. And don't forget to subscribe to this channel.
Oh, thank you. Yes. You also should subscribe to this channel because, we cover amazing things like accounting. So.
Yep. And go and if you're watching them, like them. Tell your friends you're watching them. The more you can tell people about it, the further it goes. Share.
Let's go
And hey, and if you're just a buddy of Tony and you don't care about accounting, just push play on the video and let it play in the background.
Yes.
Views are important.
Guys, I'm up to like 100 views on one of my videos. It's like, oh, this is so great. Okay, real quick, what you hear in the background is probably the fire department. Just moments before we hopped on here, Zane looks over. He's like, I think the Panda Express is on fire.
Yeah, I'm trying to see. It's definitely stopping there.
Oh, boy.
So nuts.
So,
the fire department's nearby. So, I hear sirens all the time. 99% of the time, they're going to go deal with, a homeless person who's got out of control. But, yeah, they're in the Panda Express parking lot. So something going on.
Somebody was cooking like crazy. So.
Yep. If you're in Nevada, California, and you plan on ordering from Panda Express today, probably not happening.
Not going to happen. Your order will be delayed. But what will not be delayed is I would love to hear, Zane, if you could tell us a little bit about your story. You're coming from South Africa to the U.S. You started Protea Financial, but it didn't happen overnight, obviously. So talk to us about your story. How did you get here?
Yeah, so started my career out in South Africa, worked at KPMG. After that, moved to a listed subsidiary in the technology space, so from audit environment to consulting into, corporate job, level below CFO was effectively my position, looking after a big team. My wife at the time was working at a winery. Punctuation so important. And they were owned by American owners. They really liked her. They thought she was a hard worker, and they needed a CFO in California. So they offered her a job, and an 8-minute conversation turned into, sure, why not? Let's go try it out. Let's give it a go. We had nothing tying us down at that point. It was just the two of us, no kids at that point. So we thought, well, yeah, let's go give it a go. Headed over to California. I started by working for the same company. I came in as sort of an analyst position, doing exit strategy planning, effectively. We're building models to see if we start this new winery project, how long before we can get to a point where this is worth selling, and what would that buyout for that owner be? So that was where we started. What ended up happening is we realized we got all these investments, but we don't have anybody to do the work, which is a problem. So we looked in the market for a while. We weren't really happy with what we saw. It was either expensive, poor quality, or both. And, we came up with a smart idea hey, we could do it better. I know a few people back in South Africa that I could reach out to. A lot of them are trying to re-enter the workforce. They've had kids, and now their kids are old enough, and they're looking to sort of find something else to work with. And I reached out to one of them and said, hey, any chance you want to take on a few hours of work? I was very happy that they said yes. One of the people I was at college with, a lot smarter than I was, and it was good to be able to bring her on board. And that's how we started. Just a couple of projects that we were, the ownership group was dealing with, and just a little bit of word of mouth. We started growing. In the early days, we sort of took on anybody, friends of friends, and this, that. We've got, two of my first clients was a beauty brand product and a group of barber stores, which are still our clients. 8 years later, they're still with us. But obviously, coming from the wine space, we grew a bit of a niche, and we got a bit of expertise in that. So we spent the first 4 years really developing internally and deciding, hey, this is the way we want to do stuff. and this is the processes, and this is what we're going to focus on. And it was very important to us to make sure that process works before we took it out really to the market. In that first 4 years, we sort of grew to 7 or 8 employees, maybe 30 clients, nice growth, and we really focused on our processes. So we're a little unique because I do have an office in South Africa, back down in South Africa, wholly owned subsidiary, where a team sits. The idea is that the local people here in California are the contact with the clients. We talk to the clients, we ask the client questions, we're the ones submitting information to them. But we're supported with a team in South Africa, and they're doing the work. So effectively a structure, we have a junior doing work reviewed by a senior. Senior does work, gets reviewed by account manager. Account manager takes total control of the project and is responsible for the final product. It allows us to create segregation of duties and give higher quality work. And we're able to use the time zone differences to advantage, because they're working while we're sleeping.
Yeah, which is so nice. And then one thing that you had mentioned too is like, because I'd asked you, I was like, so you're like kind of technically outsourcing to South Africa, and you're like, no, like this is our company.
Yeah, exactly. A lot of people who, offshore, for a lack of a better word, are using some third-party provider. People will be like, yeah, they're our employees. Well, they're not really. They're employed by somebody else. They're managed by somebody else, and you're just effectively sending them work. These are our people. We have an office down there. We've got an HR department. We've got a hierarchy with a management structure. And I talk to every team member once a month. This morning I had 2 phone calls with team members in South Africa. Checked in how they're doing. How's work going? We're going through appraisals at the moment. How did your appraisal process go? What do you want to do for the next 6 months? So it's our team. We're all one big company. We just happen to be on 2 continents.
That's so cool. And Protea specializes in primarily the wine industry, right?
Correct. Yeah, it's about 95% of our clients at this point are on wineries or wine businesses. Yeah. It really is our focus. The last sort of year, I've mostly turned away work that's not in that space. A couple of exceptions here and there. If I have a winery owner who's like, hey, I've got this other business, can you help us? I'm probably not going to say no. Why not make their life a little bit easier and only have to come to one point? But I'm not chasing other business. Our internal training is all developed around the wine industry. We talk about the wine industry all the time, and we really do focus on marketing on that space as well. And one of our biggest skill sets is our inventory costing, which is very specialized for the wine industry. So that's sort of
fascinating.
We keep that, that's important to us. So that's where we can add a lot of value to our clients.
So because of your expertise in this field, I actually have a lot of pressing questions. We probably won't get to them all.
Sure.
But I do have a couple. Is it okay if I ask you? Can I probe?
Of course. It's one of my favorite topics to talk about. If you go to our YouTube channel, you can find a presentation I gave to the Virginia Wine Growers Association. It's about 90 minutes where I go dig deep into the costing of wine. Into the cost of a bottle of wine.
Yeah, you heard it here. Accountants enjoy talking about accounting. If you didn't know that, that's what we're exploring on the show. So I got my first question for you, Zane. So we've talked in previous shows. The Ask an Accountant podcast. We've talked about cash basis and accrual basis of accounting. I'm really curious to get your perspective on why this topic is uniquely important for the wine industry.
Yeah, the cash versus accrual thing, one, was really unique when I came to the US because this wasn't a discussion back in South Africa. Everything was accrual basis. So it was definitely one of those topics that I had to learn. I am of the strong opinion that if you have inventory, you need to be doing some form of accrual accounting. It doesn't have to be full-on GAAP, right? I like to call it GAAP-ish, which CPAs, what the heck is that? Yeah. And I've got my favorite example is always like, I'm not going to tell a winery owner to straight line their lease because, they're going to tell me to be both. It's never going to be a good result. So, but you need to understand what that inventory costs. And the wine industry is really unique as well, right? So, sort of October, the growing cycle starts, and it's going to be a whole year before you can pick those grapes. And then most of those grapes, before they get into the final bottle that goes onto the shelf, it's probably going to be another 2 years. So that inventory has a 3-year cycle before it's even ready to go anywhere. So if you're just expensing things as you pay them on the cash basis, there's no way for you to understand what your cost of goods are on the bottle of wine that's sold at that point in time. So you have to go with some sort of accrual accounting. And it is tough because, vast majority of the wineries we're dealing with for tax purposes, have to go cash basis. In reality, it's actually the hybrid basis, and they have to show some sort of inventory anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So you might as well get your bookkeeping and your operational accounts correct. For one, it'll make that tax process a little bit easier. Number two, without really understanding the cost of that inventory and what it costs from, dirt to bottle, how do you know your margins? How do you set your selling price? How do you make a decision about any sort of marketing program if you don't know how much margin you have to give away? So accrual basis for wineries or any company that's dealing with inventory, for me, just is so, so important. And it doesn't have to be a perfect gap accounting. It just needs to be on accrual basis.
Yeah, that's so powerful. And I think something that I learned as I was talking with you, yet another reason why accrual accounting is so important, it has a little bit to do also with like the operating cycle. I mean, you touched on it when you said the 3-year piece, but like if we want to contrast that to something that's a very transactional business like e-commerce, or I don't know, say like you're a restaurant or something like that, where it's like as you are collecting, you're selling something and you're collecting money immediately. Something like the wine industry, your operating cycle is so long. The last thing you need from a management perspective is to only have books that are on a cash basis. Like accrual basis is going to be what drives better decision making in the moment, because you don't have the cash, right away.
Yeah, no, because of the operating cycle is a very cash heavy business. There's tons of jokes about, if you want to be a millionaire, open a wine business when you're a billionaire type of thing. It's just, it burns through cash in a really, really quick way. And because of the aging process, there's just so much of the cost of goods that if you use the cash basis, you're going to lose it. It's going to disappear into history, and you'll never understand how much margin you're making, and if you're covering your costs. And because it's a complicated system as well, people, I think it's easy for winery owners to think, hey, I got my grapes, got my cost of my bottle, my label, my closure, easy, right? No. What about the facility that you needed to use to make that?
Good.
What about the people that you have to employ to do that? Hey, what about those barrels and tanks that you age the wine in? It's all these overheads that people forget about. And it can be a material number, specifically when they're growing production. If they're early on, like, hey, we're going to be a 5,000 case winery at some point. My first vintage was 1,000 cases. My costs are fixed, and now I have to share them over 1,000 cases. Like, that can be a fairly big number.
Oh yeah.
Even though, to each bottle, when you bring it down to the bottle level, it's just tough. You see it so many times, and it's always been a difficult industry to take price increases as well. People are really scared to increase the price of wine, especially for those wineries that are very heavily into distribution, because distributors are going to push back, right? There's 11,500 wineries in the US. Like, there are plenty of options we can go to. So if you increase your prices, we're going to walk away.
Right.
And that can scare a winery owner, because like, oh my word, they're selling 20% of my wine. If they walk away, well, they're not going to walk away. That's just a story to try to keep the prices lower, so that those salespeople don't have to do the hard work on the back end.
Yeah, that's good. We actually just had a live question come through. This may be the first time I'm asking it live, but shout out to Serena. Thank you so much for submitting this. Funny enough, Zane, you and I were just talking about this before we went live, and it has to do with the impact of the last 2 years, COVID, on the wine industry. So the question goes, I wonder how wineries were impacted, especially the last 2 years. I wonder if some people, some of these wine industry business owners have to ask some PPP loans to keep operating. What has been your perspective on the impact that COVID has had on the wine industry?
Yeah, well, and thanks for the question. That's pretty cool that we got one. I definitely don't get that on my channel when I go live. COVID has been an interesting space for the wine industry, right? There's a lot of people that actually benefited from it. A lot of them were heavily weighted in distribution. And when COVID went down, people were quick to help people that they like. So if there was a winery that they liked, they headed out to that winery's website and try to see if I can buy wine online, right? I've got all this extra disposable income. I can't go to a restaurant and buy that glass of wine for $20. Well, why didn't I buy that bottle of wine for $20? So we definitely saw some really nice movement for wineries that were either able to sort of adjust their release to get cash in the door around the early stages of COVID, which helped a lot of them. They're able to move wine, even if they were discounting it or paying for shipping, doing all these, things to try stimulate business at that point. But it was just so much better margin, right? Because if your bottle of wine sells for $20, you're selling that same bottle of wine to a distributor for $10. So if you can sell it for $20, your margin is just going to be better. So we saw a lot of people, even though their revenue went down, their profits went up because now the gross margin is a little bit better. So they had more gross margin dollars. So there was a lot of benefit. Not saying that people didn't hurt. There's a lot of wineries that did hurt. We're fortunate that none of our clients closed down because of the pandemic, and they did a really good job. And we are also very fortunate. We had a bunch of wineries who were very early on to virtual tastings. So they were, in front of the trend as well and be able to do all of that. We did do a lot of PPP work for clients to try to keep people in jobs, tasting room jobs. Like there's no tasting room, there's no job type situation. So we did do that. It was, it was a very interesting period of time. I had to do a lot more studying than I ever thought I would have to. But we're really happy. Every PPP loan we applied for one of our clients was approved. And on that first round that went really quickly, we had a 100% success rate with applications as well, which we were really, really proud of. And being able to keep people in jobs just shows how important the accountant role can be.
Yeah, that's huge. Two major things that stood out to me in what you were just sharing. Number one, I would never have thought about that dynamic in how the wine industry would have been impacted. But you're absolutely right. Like people's disposable income, like they had so much that there's a pent up buying capacity. They weren't going to restaurants. They weren't doing these things. And so like you said, it's like, well, they still want to enjoy alcohol, right? So being able to go direct to the wineries and the vineyards that they love, they've come to learn to love, that direct to consumer channel, it's so much more profitable. It's just harder to get to in a normal business context. But
yeah, I think the big part about it is, right, there's a lot of like experts out there for many years of being like, hey, wineries have to be harder. We've got to get into digital. We've got to get into digital. We've got to get into digital. And the industry is just like, people will come to us. People will come to us. Don't worry about it. And what happened during the pandemic, it forced the wineries to go digital. So what happened is the wineries got to where they needed to be at that point in time. Though if it wasn't for the pandemic, it might have taken 10 years for them to get there.
Interesting.
So there was a lot of like talk how they're falling behind other, alcoholic beverage brands, spirits and beer specifically. But the pandemic will help them eliminate that a lot of the way.
Yeah.
And the government helped as well, right? The rules around alcohol in this country are nuts. And
yes,
there was yeah.
They totally. Can I share a really, really quick one in where I live in Minnesota? It wasn't until about a couple years ago that we finally started to be able to sell alcohol on Sundays. We were like a very, very strict place. And then wow, we can now buy alcohol on Sundays. It was like, everything just changed. We still can't buy alcohol in a grocery store. Like people don't understand, like this is not normal for us in Minnesota. Like you go to a grocery store, you get near beer, you get 4-3 beer or whatever, but you can't get actual like alcohol at a grocery store. It has to be a separate establishment. Weird laws. It's a whole thing. That's a whole different topic, but you're absolutely right. It's a strange place here in America.
Yeah, I mean, I remember the days back in South Africa where you go to grocery stores on a Sunday and there was like literally cages pulled over because they wouldn't sell alcohol, and that wasn't too far back either. So it's not surprising. And I mean, Minnesota is still one of the easiest states. There's some really complicated ones out there.
I believe it. Well, let's something that you had talked about before. You had mentioned the term costing, and I'd love for you to just expand a little bit about it, because I've heard it, I'm familiar with it, maybe people have heard about it before, but what can you tell us about this term and why it's important to a winery owner? Like, what are the implications if costing isn't done properly for a winery owner?
Yeah, so costing is the method of trying to figure out, based on accounting practices, what that bottle of wine costs. So it's taking into your input costs and figuring out what is the final value of that product. So as I mentioned earlier, the easy ones to identify is the juice, right? It's the grapes or the bulk wine that you're purchasing. Then you look at the bottle and you go, actually, probably have one right behind me. I could have pulled out if I was more prepared. But the glass is easy. You can see the glass. You understand that it costs there. There's a pretty label on it. You understand that's going to do it. There's a cork or a screw top. You understand that that's a part of it. But then it's the other stuff that people don't think about. It's how is that wine manufactured? And the winery owners hate when I use the word manufactured, but somebody has to manufacture that wine, right? That wine has to go from a grape. It needs to be pressed into a juice. It needs to go into a tank, and then it sits around waiting, right? A bunch of stuff happens. There is an art to it. Those guys are really smart. They'll do stuff I'll never experience, but there's a process to get there. There's a facility where that's housed. It's the equipment that needs to go in, and those costs need to be allocated over time. So obviously, the longer it's in a barrel, the longer it's in the tank, the longer it takes to get into the point where it's in a bottle and ready to be sold. It's gathering costs all the way through. So it's the process of doing the accounting on a monthly basis, going, these are the total gallons we have at month end. These are the total costs for that month. Let's allocate those costs. Now, vast majority of them, you'll just go total, cost divided by total gallons, but then there's some specific costs. Like I did lab testing on that vintage. Great. That is a specific cost. So it gets a little bit, there's a little bit of science behind it when you're looking at allocated costs versus specific costs, and you build that over time. Then you add your bottling costs, and you've got this, you got your total cost of goods. And it's super important to know your costs because you want to understand what your margins are.
Oh, yeah.
If I'm to sell it for $20, how much did it cost me to make the bottle of wine?
Right.
And that's a place where then you can either make a decision, hey, do I need to price it higher, or do I have to find a way to reduce my costs?
That's right. And that's really what it comes down to, right? It's like, if we don't have good costing, if we don't have good accrual accounting, it really ultimately impacts a good educated decision, right? Like you were saying with the pricing. Like, How do I know if $20 is the right price point for my true cost here? And one thing that we talked about before too was a hidden cost, something you don't always think about, in any inventory business, but probably especially in the wine industry, is spoilage and shrinkage, right? Like I'm sure not everything makes its way into the finished product, right?
Yeah, that's a little of a complicated one because you actually don't make any adjustment for it, right? Because there's going to be natural evaporation, or if it's in a barrel, there's going to be, the wood's going to take some of that wine with it. So we don't really make any adjustments. You just keep your costs. And then at the end of the day, there's just going to be less gallons to put into bottles, right? So you're then figuring out the bottle cost. So you're gathering the cost all the time. You don't do a specific write-off in the inventory at all unless you're going to throw it away.
Sure. Like something went terribly wrong and then you just have to toss it.
Yeah. And you can't just toss it though. You got to get TTB approval, and they actually will send somebody out to watch that you're actually disposing of it, so that, they want people disposing of wine and then selling it, right?
I see. Okay, guys.
They want them.
If there was ever a plug for why it's important to hire somebody who knows this industry, it was that statement right there, because I had no idea. I want to reiterate again and again and again. We have amazing people on our show who have great insights into their industries. I am a certified public accountant. I'm an active CPA. Had no idea about that regulation. No clue. So hiring a person like Steve, working with a place like Protea Financial, is why you work with specialists. These people know their stuff. That's so cool. Zane, I've got one more question. I wish we had more time to get through all the questions. You know what I think we're going to have to do is, for all the questions we didn't get through, we're going to have you on the show again. And we're going to have more questions.
If I have to.
Okay, I guess. I twist your arm. So I'm trying to pick the best of the questions. So we touched a little bit on these other ones, but I think maybe one, like, kind of a simple one. Maybe simple, maybe not. I don't know. But it's something near and dear to my heart, tax. And so the question is, when we talk about tax, most Americans are assuming we're talking about income tax. Like that's the thing that's at top of mind. That's usually what we think of when we think about tax time. It's income tax. So my question for you, Zane, is that the only tax that winery owners should be concerned about in their business?
Yeah, unfortunately not. I mean, I wish it was that straightforward. There would just be some sort of state and federal tax, but there's a lot more to it, right? In the wine space, you have excise tax, So there's the tax on effectively just having the wine. And then if you're selling into different states, there's going to be sales tax if you're selling to individuals. So there's two complicated taxes over there. You learn about it pretty quickly in the wine industry because you can't sell wine without a license. And then once you get that approval in that state, they send you plenty of notices to remind you to pay for it. But it is a complicated space, right? We'll help people as far as we can, but when it gets really complicated, we'll find somebody that's smarter than us to do that. Nexus laws over the last couple of years have become crazy as well. So for any business that's not wine, like Nexus laws are important. The laws around wine actually supersede the Nexus laws. So if you go to a state where there's a threshold for sales tax and you're not going to hit it, but you're registered in it, it doesn't matter in the wine industry. You still got to charge sales tax.
Really?
Because you're selling wine in that state.
Wow.
So very much a lot more complicated because the wine rules are much more stringent.
That's fascinating. I would never... Here you think about like the American tax system, and it can be really confusing because what you even just talked about is you're selling to different states, and so therefore different sales taxes. Just a quick plug, if you weren't already aware, sales tax is not a federal concept. It is a state concept. It's a state tax concept. So you're talking about working with multiple different states. Everybody's got slightly different rules, and like you're talking about with like Nexus, like I'm sure you go to one state and it's going to be a different limit, and another state it's a different thing, and it's a mess. And then you throw Wayfair into the whole situation. It's like, whoa.
Yeah. Luckily, there's a lot of good software out there that will do a lot of the thinking for you, which you can just throw on the overlay on your website and it'll take care of it for you, thankfully. But you still got to monitor it. You got to have somebody paying attention, and then you got to go do those registrations. And some of them can be rough. I mean, they basically want like the birth certificate of your firstborn child to be able to sell to the state. Like, it's crazy.
Yeah.
But yeah, get a specialist when it comes to taxes, excise, sales tax, income tax. And for all the non-accountants out there, not all of us do taxes.
Amen. In fact, this is a quick shout out to Lucas Sandal, who is going to be a future guest of ours. He runs Accounting Couture. He's got a nice little shirt that says accountant. I don't know if you've seen that little asterisk. And then down below it says doesn't do taxes or something to that effect. I'm like, I'm going to buy that shirt, and I'm going to wear it when we interview.
Oh yeah, he can make a ton of money just by like printing a bunch of those off. There'll be a ton of us that'll purchase it.
I know. I love it. I just absolutely love it. Well, Zane, in addition to loving that shirt, I've loved our time together, having this conversation. You're just a wealth of knowledge. And, well, I mean, I think so.
I got a little bit up there.
You got a little bit. Yeah, that's true. It's true. Well, I really appreciate you coming on the show. If I've learned anything, it's if I've got questions about the wine industry, Zane is my guy to go to because he knows a lot about a little bit about a lot of things. So
that's a good way to put it.
That's definitely a way. So before we leave, Zane, I want to give you an opportunity to speak to and give some words of wisdom to an audience group. Okay, so this audience group, these are wine industry business owners. These are wineries. And they're just sitting here and they're listening and they're just waiting for words of wisdom to come from Zane. So Zane, as an accountant, as a business owner, what words of wisdom would you give to those people?
I mean, my number one piece of advice is go get yourself an accountant. If you're, and this is not just for the wine industry, but really for the wine industry specifically, get yourself an accountant early. It's complicated. You want it to be accurate. And I can promise you from the 8 years of experience at Protea, it is a lot cheaper for us to do it the first time and get it right than to try clean up a mess that's been in place. It is so hard to unravel things if it's been done incorrectly. And honestly, you can use that time in better ways. You can go sell more, or you can take the time for yourself and relax. You don't have to kill yourself trying to keep a set of books. Not worth it.
That's really good. That is excellent advice. And I feel like for some reason, I feel like I've heard similar advice on our previous podcasts as well. And there's a reason for it, right? You work with professionals, you save money in the long run. So Zane, great advice to wine business owners, wineries that are out there. So again, Zane, just want to say thank you so much. You are able to be found on, was it Facebook, LinkedIn? Like, where are you at? Where are you at for people?
Yeah, I mean, check out our website, proteafinancial.com. It's a great place to go. We post blogs every week, so there's a lot of great content that comes out over there. As mentioned, we have the YouTube channel, Protea Academy. Go subscribe, watch some videos, give them some likes, share them to your friends. I'm very active on LinkedIn, so you can find me on LinkedIn, Zane Stevens. That company has a LinkedIn account as well. We put a bunch of really good content out there. We've got a Facebook account as well. Less active, less great information, but it's available. We also have a Twitter account. Mostly that is just reposting all of our blog posts, make it easily accessible for people. And that's pretty much. I mean, I'm a good place to start. If you're looking for a little bit of knowledge, good place to come is check out my LinkedIn page.
Do it. I regularly engage with him, and I will just say on Monday he posted something incredibly controversial, and all the accountants came and flocked and had opinions about it. So he likes to stir the pot. No, I'm just kidding. You're not really that much of a pot stirrer, but
yeah, my name's on Michael.
Right. But fun fact, he is going to be on the show next week. We're super excited for that. But yes, I would highly recommend go check out LinkedIn for my friend Zane. We interact on a regular basis too. So if you don't know where he's at, I'm sure I've commented on his stuff at some point. So Zane, thank you again.
Give Tony a follow, hit his bell, make sure you follow that up. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel. Give it a watch, give it a like.
That's right. That's right.
Great content. It's really, really great stuff on this channel. So do yourself a favor and subscribe.
Appreciate that, Zane. I did not pay him to say that. I promise you. Zane, thank you again so much. And thank you everybody who tuned in today. I know we had a couple live viewers, which was awesome. And I hope everybody who listened found value in our episode today. So if you have a pressing accounting question that you would like answered by future guests, you can go ahead and email me at tony@acquip.com. That's ACCQUIP.com. Also, if you are an accounting professional or know somebody who is an accounting professional who'd like to be on the show, please go ahead and reach out to me as well. Now, we do have a great free webinar that is following very shortly after this, probably in the next 20 minutes or so. And we would love it if you were to join us there. This webinar is going to be for anybody who has started a small business or small business or a side hustle in the last year, somebody who's about to do that, or somebody who might not be entirely satisfied with your current accounting and bookkeeping support. So if you fit in one of those three buckets, you will be very well served by this webinar. So you'll want to listen. You'll definitely want to be listening into this. It's all about empowering your decision to choose which work you are going to outsource and which work you are going to learn to do for yourself. So on that note, again, I want to say thank you, Zane, to you. Thank you to our audience for listening. And as always, keep calm and keep your clothes on.